Hello, welcome to Taboo Tuesday. I am here with Julia. She is another FRC mobility instructor, just like me, as well as a yoga instructor. She's based in Austria, yes?
Yeah.
All right, I'm like 95% sure. And go ahead and tell us more about yourself, Julia.
Actually, I'm a retired yoga instructor, so I don't teach yoga anymore. I stopped teaching yoga at the end of 2019 to really focus on all things body optimization, joint optimization, better breathing. So I'm really I made a decision to really go with the physical world and just be a student of yoga from time to time, but not really be in the teacher's role anymore.
Nice. Yeah, that's I'm kind of leaning in that direction, but I'm not quite there yet. That's really cool. Yeah, we definitely can't do everything. It's very important to choose your focus, choose what you want to do, choose what you don't want to do. This week we are focusing on pleasure and fitness. Julie and I have had so many good conversations about this. We really had to pick and choose the best little pieces to put into this conversation. So to begin, we're just going to talk about our yoga teacher trainings and what, specifically you have a really good story about what you learned with masculine and feminine energy and how your experience was.
Yeah. So I remember a story from my first yoga teacher training, and we were going into polarities or feminine, masculine energy, and we were using kind of yin yang as a framework. And the teacher read the words for the yin or for the feminine side, and it was all yielding, negative, passive, cold, soft, intuitive. I was like, I don't want to be any of those things. That sounds terrible. I hate the feminine qualities, and all the masculine qualities, they sounded super cool to me. They were positive, active, stay logical, hard. And I was like, no, this sucks. And I think it's what this story told me, or why I wanted to share it, is I think this is a general approach that we can notice in society. Also a little bit in yoga, different yoga styles, they're very hard yoga styles.
Hot yoga where you're sweating, and yeah, definitely.
Very much focused on performance. And also this is a narrative that we see in fitness a lot, where we have this whole no pain, no gain narrative. And so I think that's a really good story of how reactive I was hearing those feminine qualities. I was so turned off. And I think this is something that happens a lot in society. And also how we talked about how it's also something that men don't want to have, these softer qualities, these less performative qualities, but then also women don't want to have them. And it just has to do with how it's all set up, how what our culture values as a big scheme of things, what we value.
And this again reminds me of previous episodes. We've talked about how culture values masculine energy more typically because of all sorts of histories that we can't get into today. But then again, when you think about that, the performative feeling that sometimes I've definitely walked into a yoga studio and I feel like everybody's performing. It's this weird pressure dynamic where I have to do everything the teacher says. And this was more how I would take classes before I became a teacher. But then learning how to listen to my own body, like you said, not going into a class being wow, I'm gonna show this teacher that I'm their best student. It's more okay, I'm going for me. Maybe today I don't want to do 30 chaturangas, right? Maybe today I need to take it a lot easier, or maybe today I really need to push myself, right? And having the intelligence in your body and mind to know when to do one or the other, and having also the safety and the comfort of knowing you can be in a class and you don't have to be doing what everybody else is doing, and you're not going to look like everybody else because we're all different.
Yeah. And I think that is so hard to do because it's kind of a twofold process. So on the one hand, you need to be educated about your body, and like you need to be, I almost want to say like there needs to be some type of science-based or evidence-based approach, so you kind of know the facts about like what's good for bodies, like what's good for certain joints, stuff like that. So a lot of the topic that we both got into after becoming yoga teachers. But then at the same time, you also need some more of this like soft skills of these like, okay, can I tune into my body? Like, how do I actually feel today? And like, you know, even if your fitness tracker says your body battery is on 98, but you feel like crap, you gotta be able to say like, you know what, actually maybe this thing isn't correct, and I'm just gonna trust myself and go with my own feelings. And I think this is like the kind of balance that we need to find to have a pleasurable fitness experience, but also like more pleasure in life, is this kind of approach where we have both of these qualities. So we have like, okay, I actually know the facts, and like I know how it works to build good habits, how to build a good structure around my training so I can progressively overload. But then at the same time, there are some qualities like, how was my sleep tonight? Like how am I actually feeling? How am I experiencing my body today? And I think we're very much focused on pushing all the time, and like you said, like doing 30 chaturangas and like impressing our group fitness teacher. And so it gets very, very, very hard to actually slow down, take a second and be like, hold on, like what do I actually know, first of all, about training people? Because I'm sure that's something you experience as a teacher too. Like the recommendations we make for our students, they're so loving. Like we're so like taking care of our students, giving the best advice possible. But then with your own body, you're oftentimes like, go, 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 go. Like
concept of like, it's often easier for us to have compassion for other people than to have compassion for ourselves and for our own body. And that's so important. And that, like you just said, requires that emotional intelligence, that body literacy to know those things. And that's I think one of the reasons that we're probably both drawn so much to FRC, because it breaks it down and it really teaches you how each of your joints move. But then, so another thing we wanted to talk about is the actual scientific information that we have on men versus women when it comes to things related to health and fitness. Often studies, I think you were the one who told me this and I was shocked, often studies will choose to work with men because women's hormones are too complicated, but like it's 50% of our population, maybe we should study it, right?
Yeah, so that actually ties into the first part where I was talking about like we need to have like some solid information, not just like intuitively sensing our bodies. Like there needs to be some kind of like evidence-based approach, but we don't really have it. Like there's it's slowly starting to emerge. Like I don't want to say it's not there anymore, because like slowly it's starting to get a little bit better. But like in general, when you read about something fitness related, you can assume that it was probably tested on men and that it was made for someone who has a very like simple hormonal cycle, if I can call it that, for men too. And that's not even like just a conversation about women's bodies, but that's like a conversation also about everyone who doesn't fall into this like polar spectrum of like women and men, you know, like what's with people who are going through hormonal therapy, like who are wanting to change their gender. So I think that's a conversation, like if we want to talk about experiencing more pleasure in our bodies and experiencing a more pleasurable fitness experience, we need to start talking about how hormones influence fitness, how hormones influence our health. And it can't be done by us trainers because we're not endocrinologists. Like we can't do the research. So like we can open up this conversation and we can be like, hey, you know, like what's actually happening to women's bodies, what's actually happened to transgender bodies. But then there also needs to be a response in research, there needs to be a response in like general media coverage, so that we can all have this conversation together.
Yeah, and that wraps around again. So like, hopefully once this research continues and picks up a lot, then as trainers, how do we then learn how to work with women and men differently? You know, it's not like this huge different thing, but like you said, women have different hormonal cycles than men, and that affects how much energy we have during certain weeks, which likely should affect a training program for somebody, right? Depending on what their goals are. And that's something that often is just not even discussed. It's not even mentioned. Like maybe people say, oh, if you're having cramps, then take it easy. But like, we don't get much further than that.
Or like in yoga, they say like, don't invert on your period. And then there's like other people who are like, no, that's wrong. And like, that's like the only time we ever talk about these things is like when they get really bad. So we don't really talk about the nuances that we could be talking about if it were a little bit better. And like, if we think about like knowing more about your body, just in like you said, like this week I'm gonna have more energy, next week I'm gonna have less energy. It would help so much with building better habits and like making programs work for women, because so often people who have like a fluctuating hormonal cycle, they don't do well with a super linear program. So we need to take it easy maybe when we have PMS, and we need to be okay with it. Like we need to know emotionally, but also like cognitively know that that's going to be the good solution long term, you know, that we're not failing because we're not pushing all the time, that we're not failing because we're focusing on rest and we're focusing on sleep and like better recovery. In fact, we're actually doing something very valuable if we talk about sustainable fitness, like a sustainable approach to fitness, and not just a performative approach to fitness.
Yeah, and like in some ways, from the times when I used to take yoga classes as performative experiences, especially coming with a background as a dancer, like always, like you're always supposed to perform during class as a dancer. It's been so nice getting out of that, and I enjoy myself so much more when I'm not like, you know, trying to impress somebody. When like as a teacher, I'm never wanting students to impress me, right? I'm wanting them to focus on their bodies, to learn about their own bodies, to look inward. And that is something that it's hard to do in a class. You have to like coach somebody through that. Just like the differences between men and women's training, we should talk about these things. So like, we've probably all had experiences where like maybe we plan to go to the gym this day and we're feeling really tired, and then we don't go and we beat ourselves up about it. Where maybe if we had that baseline understanding, oh, this week because of my hormones I'm going to be more tired, then that doesn't happen. When, you know, ideally you don't beat yourself about anything, but we are human. And just like you said, like that's going to lead to burnout. And when it comes to taking care of our bodies and our minds, like you want that to be consistent and you don't want to burn out. And especially nowadays, I remember, I think it was last year, there was an article about burnout that was like, our generation is like huge on burnout. Like a lot of people are burning out. So finding that balance, it's like we mentioned that it's like FRC, how we find a balance between stretching and strengthening. Like if you stretch too much, it's not going to be very good for you. If you strengthen too much, it's not going to be very good for you. You have to find the in-between that works for you. And of course, for some people, they're going to lean towards more flexible. Some people are going to lean towards more strong, but they complement each other. And they're both really beneficial. All right, we got about 30 seconds left. Any last words to close this episode?
Well, I think what you mentioned was really good. Like, just, I think if we're able to like see all of these experiences more on a spectrum and not as like black and white, then we're gonna have an experience that's so much more pleasurable, not just training, but also in our life. And I think that's really like what we wanted to say with this talk is like, learn to trust in both sides and don't view them as opposites, but actually as like complementary parts.
Oh, there's my timer. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. If you on the other side of the screen listening are interested in discussing something taboo, being a host on an episode, go ahead, DM me, reach out to me in some way. I love to talk about this stuff. It's fascinating. And we'll see you next week. All right. Bye.